The bear adopted a German Shepherd puppy. What happened next left everyone in tears. In the San Pedro Valley, bathed in the golden dust of the western sunset, the Tierra Serena Sanctuary served as the final refuge for creatures once wounded, both in body and in soul. This was not a zoo, but a place of healing, where beings cast aside by humans found peace again. The sanctuary sprawled across 50 acres of varied terrain, meadows dotted with wild flowers, dense copses of pine and oak, natural streams that gurgled over smooth stones, and rolling hills that caught the last light of day. Art Hernandez, a retired veterinarian with salt and pepper hair and hands weathered by decades of caring for animals, had founded Tierra Serena 15 years ago after witnessing too many broken creatures discarded when they were no longer profitable or entertaining. Art had invested his life savings into creating a haven where they could heal or at least live out their remaining days with dignity. Animals remember everything, Art would tell the volunteers and visitors. They carry their histories in their bodies, in their movements, in their eyes. Our job isn't to erase those memories but to help create new ones that might balance the scales. Bruno, a large aging brown bear who had been kept in captivity with a traveling circus for 15 years, was the most prominent resident there. With his mottled gray-brown fur, heavy gait, and weary eyes, Bruno never integrated with the other bears. He carried deep psychological scars from years of chains, beatings, and being forced to perform clownish acts. Though he had been rescued and brought to Tierra Serena, he would still roar alone at night, as if calling out for something long lost. Sarah Morales, a young zoologist who had joined the sanctuary 2 years ago, had taken a particular interest in Bruno. Where others saw a dangerous, unpredictable animal, she recognized a profound grief. "He's not aggressive," she insisted during a staff meeting when someone suggested moving Bruno to a more isolated enclosure after he had destroyed his feeding station. "He's mourning. He's been mourning for 15 years. "Mourning what?" asked Miguel, one of the newer caretakers. Sarah shook her head. "Everything. His freedom. His dignity. The life he never got to live." They had tried various forms of enrichment for Bruno, puzzle feeders, scent trails, even attempts at socialization with 2 female bears who had been rescued from a bile farm in Asia. Nothing worked. Bruno would investigate new objects with initial curiosity, then retreat to his favorite spot under a large oak tree, where he would spend hours staring at the distant mountains. Art had built Bruno's enclosure with particular care, a full acre of mixed woodland and open space, with a deep pool where the bear could swim when the summer heat became oppressive. But the most distinctive feature was what Art called the viewing place, a flat rock outcropping that faced west, perfectly positioned to catch the sunset. Bruno would often climb there in the evening, his massive silhouette black against the blazing sky, still as a monument. "What do you think he's looking for?" Sarah once asked Art as they watched Bruno from the observation deck. Art, his face lined with the wisdom of years spent understanding creatures who couldn't speak, replied softly, "Not what, who. I think every captive animal spends their life waiting for someone to truly see them." It was a crisp autumn morning when Elias, a German Shepherd puppy only 8 weeks old, accidentally wandered away from his owner during a hike near the sanctuary. The family had been following one of the public trails that skirted the perimeter of Tierra Serena, stopping for a picnic by a stream. In the momentary chaos of unpacking food and settling children, no one noticed the curious puppy following the scent of something wild into the underbrush, through an old tunnel that Bruno had once dug in an escape attempt but never finished. Elias stumbled into the old bear's enclosure. The tunnel, nearly forgotten by the sanctuary staff, had been partially filled in by natural erosion but remained just large enough for a determined puppy to squeeze through. No one knew. There were no fences between them. Bruno had been napping in a patch of dappled sunlight when an unfamiliar scent roused him. His nostrils flared and his small ears swiveled forward. It was not the smell of the usual food deliveries, nor the scent of the caretakers he had grown accustomed to. This was something new, something that triggered ancient instincts. Elias, with the boundless confidence of youth, had been exploring his new surroundings with tail wagging and nose to the ground. The puppy had no concept of danger, no understanding that the massive creature slowly rising to its feet less than 50 yards away represented something to fear. When Elias finally looked up and saw Bruno, he did what any sociable puppy would do: he barked cheerfully and bounded forward, eager to meet this new potential playmate. Bruno's reaction was instantaneous and terrifying. Years of conditioned response to sudden movements, to unexpected intrusions into his space, took over. He reared up on his hind legs, towering at his full height of nearly 8 feet, and let out a roar that echoed through the entire sanctuary. By the time the sanctuary team discovered what had happened, Elias was lying trembling under a rock, while Bruno was in a full-blown panic. He roared furiously, smashing logs, shaking the entire sanctuary. But as he approached the puppy, Bruno suddenly stopped. His eyes froze when he saw Elias offering no resistance. A memory from the circus surged back, of a small dog that had once been beaten to death trying to protect him. Bruno whimpered, then slowly lowered himself beside Elias, as if trying to atone for a ghost of the past. Sarah had been the first to reach the observation platform overlooking Bruno's enclosure, alerted by the bear's uncharacteristic roaring. What she saw stopped her breath. Bruno, the most isolated and traumatized animal in their care, was gently nudging a tiny puppy with his massive muzzle. The contrast was staggering. Bruno's paw alone was larger than the puppy's entire body. "Don't move," Art whispered, joining her moments later. "Don't make any sudden sounds." "We have to get the puppy out," another staff member urged. "No," Art interrupted firmly. "Look at his body language. He's not threatening the pup." Indeed, Bruno had positioned himself between the trembling puppy and the rest of the world, his massive body forming a protective barrier. His movements, usually lumbering and resigned, had taken on a new deliberateness. He was being careful. "What do we do?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. Art watched the scene below with the intensity of someone witnessing a miracle. "We wait. We observe. We learn." From that day, a strange bond began. Bruno didn't know how to play. He clawed at branches, dragged straw into piles, dug up ant nests, led Elias to streams, and even offered honeycombs despite being stung by bees. Elias, the small innocent, brought a childlike joy into the life of the reclusive bear. He rolled in straw, leapt onto Bruno's back, and nestled his head into Bruno's neck at bedtime. Bruno gradually learned how to respond: soft grumbles, calming sighs, or gentle taps of his paw when Elias twitched in dreams. After that first encounter, the sanctuary team had debated endlessly about what to do. The puppy's owners had been located, a family from Sacramento who had been devastated by their pet's disappearance. Art had personally called them, explaining the extraordinary situation. "Your puppy is safe," he had assured them, "but something unexpected has happened." He invited them to come see for themselves. When they arrived the next day, Art led them to a special viewing area where they could observe Bruno and Elias without being detected. The family watched in astonishment as their tiny puppy fearlessly played with one of the most formidable predators on the continent. "We've never seen anything like this," Art explained quietly. "Bruno has been with us for 7 years, and in all that time, he's never connected with any living creature until you're Elias." The family, parents and 2 young children, looked at each other, emotions warring on their faces, relief that their puppy was alive, confusion at the bizarre situation, and the dawning realization of what Art was about to ask. "You want to keep him," the mother said. It wasn't a question. Art nodded slowly. "I know it's an enormous thing to ask. But I believe there's something healing happening here, not just for Bruno, but perhaps for Elias too. We would compensate you, of course. Help you find another puppy." "No," the father interrupted, watching as Bruno gently rolled a pine cone toward Elias, who pounced on it with delight. "Some things are meant to be. Look at them." And so, Elias officially became a resident of Tiara Serena Sanctuary. The staff set up proper accommodations within Bruno's enclosure. A small insulated doghouse for nights when the bear's body heat might not be enough. Regular deliveries of proper dog food alongside Bruno's meals, and a specialized veterinary schedule. Sarah took on the primary responsibility for their care, spending hours each day observing and documenting their interactions. What had begun as professional interest quickly deepened into emotional investment. She started bringing her lunch to the observation deck, then staying long after her shift ended, watching as Bruno and Elias developed their own language of gestures and sounds. "They're teaching each other how to be," she told Art one evening as they watched Bruno carefully constructing a bed of soft grasses, Elias supervising with apparent canine approval. Elias never learned to fear, and Bruno was remembering how to trust. The sanctuary began to change around the unlikely pair. Volunteers requested assignments that allowed them glimpses of Bruno and Elias. Donations increased as word spread through conservation circles. A local photographer's images of the bear and puppy went viral online, bringing welcome attention to the sanctuary's mission. But what mattered most was the transformation in Bruno himself. The nighttime roaring ceased. The destructive episodes became rare, then stopped entirely. His movements, once heavy with the invisible weight of trauma, began to show occasional moments of lightness. He would sometimes bat playfully at butterflies when Elias chased them, or splash with unexpected joy in the pool on hot days. "He's healing," Sarah whispered to Art one day, tears in her eyes, as they watched Bruno delicately present Elias with a freshly caught fish, waiting patiently as the puppy sniffed it curiously before declining the offering. "They both are," Art replied. As the weeks turned to months, Elias grew rapidly, his puppy proportions beginning to stretch into the leaner lines of adolescence. His relationship with Bruno evolved as well, developing a rhythm of play, rest, exploration, and companionship that seemed to fulfill deep needs in both of them. One spring day, as wildflowers painted the sanctuary in bursts of color, Bruno led Elias on a new expedition. The bear had been teaching the growing dog about foraging, showing him which berries were safe to eat, which streams held the sweetest water. Today they ventured higher up the rocky section of the enclosure than they had gone before. Elias, now 6 months old and full of boundless energy, ran ahead, his nose twitching at the new scents carried on the breeze. Neither he nor Bruno noticed the papery gray structure tucked beneath an overhanging rock, a wasp nest, dormant through winter but now humming with spring activity. When Elias disturbed the nest, got stung, and panicked, he bolted toward the edge of a cliff. It happened so quickly that Sarah, watching from below, barely had time to shout a warning that neither animal could understand. Despite his age and old injuries, Bruno rushed to save him, pulling Elias back from the ledge, nearly falling himself. It was the first time Bruno truly fought for life, not for his own, but for the small being who had taught him how to feel again. Sarah watched, heart in her throat, as Bruno's massive jaws closed gently around Elias's scruff, dragging him back from the precipice with seconds to spare. The bear's movements were hampered by his arthritic joints, by the old injuries that had never properly healed, but he moved with desperate purpose. Once they were safely away from the edge, Bruno carefully inspected Elias, licking at the places where wasps had stung, rumbling with concern. That evening, as sunset painted the sky in brilliant orange and pink, Bruno and Elias lay together on the viewing rock. Sarah, watching from her usual place, saw Elias press his body against Bruno's side while the bear curled protectively around him. For the first time since his arrival at Tierras Serena, Bruno seemed fully present, not staring at distant mountains or lost in painful memories, but simply being here, now, with a companion who had somehow broken through decades of isolation. Summer faded into autumn, and Elias grew quickly from a little pup into a smart, strong, and emotionally attuned dog. His coat gleamed with health, his eyes bright with intelligence. He had developed an uncanny ability to read Bruno's subtle shifts in mood, anticipating the bear's needs often before Bruno himself seemed aware of them. Sarah, whose research notes had evolved into a daily journal documenting their relationship, began to notice subtle changes in Bruno's movements. The bear had always moved with the careful deliberation of an animal carrying old injuries, but now there was something different. A hesitation when rising, a reluctance to put weight on his right foreleg, occasional moments when pain would flash across his expressive face. "I think we should do a full health assessment," she suggested to Art one rainy October morning. "Something's not right with Bruno." Art's weathered face creased with concern. "I've noticed it too. The question is how to do it without separating them. Elias goes into distress whenever Bruno is out of sight, and sedating a bear would mean keeping them apart during his recovery." They decided to bring in Dr. Leanne Watson, a veterinarian who specialized in large predators and had helped with Bruno's initial rehabilitation when he first arrived at the sanctuary. Under the pretext of Elias's regular checkup, they would have her observe Bruno as well. Dr. Watson arrived the following week, her experienced eyes immediately noting what Sarah and Art had seen. She watched Bruno from various angles as he moved around the enclosure, paying particular attention to how he distributed his weight. "I don't like what I'm seeing," she said finally. "We need imaging. There's something wrong with his bone structure, more than just the old injuries and arthritis." The logistics were complicated but necessary. They would need to sedate Bruno, transport him to a facility with equipment large enough for a bear his size, conduct the tests, and return him before he fully regained consciousness, all while keeping Elias calm and prevented from following the transport vehicle. The day of Bruno's examination, Sarah took on the task of distracting Elias. She brought his favorite toys, special treats, even enlisted other dogs from the sanctuary to engage him in play. But Elias knew something was wrong. The moment Bruno was loaded into the transport, Elias began to howl, a sound so mournful it raised goosebumps on the arms of even the most experienced staff members. When Bruno returned, still groggy from sedation, Elias's relief was palpable. He circled the bear anxiously, sniffing and whining until he had assured himself that Bruno was truly back. He then settled against Bruno's side, maintaining physical contact as though afraid the bear might disappear again. Later that evening, Art called Sarah to his office. When she entered, she found him sitting at his desk, Bruno's test results spread before him, his face grave. "It's bone cancer," he said without preamble. "Advanced. Aggressive." Sarah felt the floor tilt beneath her. "How long?" Art shook his head. "Months, maybe weeks. It's already spread to his lungs. Treatment options, at his age, with his history of trauma, pain management is all we can ethically offer." Art ran a hand through his silver hair. "But that's not the only issue we need to discuss." He gestured for Sarah to sit, then continued. "Elias is young. He has his whole life ahead of him. And he's developed extraordinary emotional intelligence through his relationship with Bruno." "What are you suggesting?" Sarah asked, though she already knew. "There's a place called Golden Haven, a retirement home where many lonely souls long for a gentle companion. They've been looking for a therapy dog. Because Elias has been raised by a silent old bear, he's unlike any other dog. He knows how to be still, how to listen, how to comfort just by being there." Sarah wanted to protest, to insist that Elias and Bruno remain together until the end, but she understood the bigger picture Art was painting. "You think Elias could help people the way he helped Bruno?" "I think it would honor what they have given each other," Art said gently. "Bruno taught Elias how to heal a wounded soul. That's a rare gift. The transition would need to be gradual." They began by taking Elias on short trips outside the sanctuary, accustoming him to car rides and new environments. They introduced him to residents from Golden Haven who visited the sanctuary, watching how he responded to humans with various needs and limitations. Elias proved remarkably adaptable. Though initially anxious when separated from Bruno, he seemed to understand that these absences were temporary. He would return to the bear with new scents clinging to his fur, which Bruno would investigate thoroughly, as if trying to piece together where Elias had been. By that time, Bruno was already in the final stages of his disease, something Art had quietly kept to himself while the sanctuary team prepared Elias for his new role. The bear's appetite had diminished, his movements became increasingly labored. He spent more time resting, conserving his energy for the hours when Elias was with him. They decided to let Elias go in the gentlest way possible. Golden Haven had prepared a special room for him, with a comfortable bed and toys. The staff there had been trained in his particular needs and habits. Everything was ready on the day Elias left. Bruno didn't rage or destroy his enclosure, he simply walked up, gently licked Elias on the forehead once, then turned back to his old straw nest. That night, he no longer roared. The next morning, when Sarah brought Elias back to visit, Bruno had passed quietly, lying as if asleep, facing the old tunnel where Elias had once appeared. Sarah found him first in the soft light of dawn. She had come early, wanting to check on Bruno before bringing Elias for his visit. When she saw the bear's still form, she knew immediately. There was a peacefulness to him that had never been present in life, as though in his final moments, he had finally shed the weight of his difficult past. She sat beside him for a long time, tears streaming silently down her face, not just for Bruno, but for all the years he had suffered before finding connection, for the brief time he had known joy, for the countless animals like him who never found their way to sanctuaries like Tiara Serena. When she finally composed herself, she called Art. Together they decided that Elias should be allowed to say goodbye. It might be painful for the dog, but they believed he deserved the truth, not a mystery of sudden absence. Sarah drove to Golden Haven with a leaden heart. Elias greeted her with his usual enthusiasm, unaware that everything had changed. During the drive back to the sanctuary, she kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror, wondering how to prepare him for what was coming. But animals have their own wisdom, their own understanding of life's rhythms. As they approached Bruno's enclosure, Elias grew quiet, his body alert, his nose working to catch scents on the air. By the time Sarah opened the gate to let him in, he moved with deliberate slowness, as if already knowing. Elias didn't howl or bark. He pressed his head into Bruno's still body and lay there all afternoon, as if performing a farewell rite. That night he let out one long, mournful howl, and then never again. The sanctuary team buried Bruno beneath his favorite viewing rock, where he had spent so many evenings watching the sunset. They placed honeyberries and fresh pine boughs in the grave, things he had enjoyed in his last peaceful year. Sarah read a poem she had written about second chances and unexpected friendships, her voice breaking several times. Elias watched the proceedings with solemn attention, sitting perfectly still beside Sarah. When the last shovelful of earth had been placed, he approached the grave, sniffed it carefully, then lay down with his head on his paws. He remained there until darkness fell, when Sarah gently attached his leash and led him away. Golden Haven welcomed Elias with open arms. The residents, many of whom had followed the story of the bear and the puppy through local news, treated his arrival as an honor. A small ceremony was held in the community room, where the director explained Elias's extraordinary background and the special qualities he brought with him. Sarah gifted Elias a red wool scarf adorned with a small bear-shaped pin woven with strands of Bruno's fur. He wore it every day and became the soul of Golden Haven. He sat beside elders who no longer remembered their names, curled up with terminal cancer patients, and soothed PTSD-stricken veterans with his quiet gaze. They called him the Bear's Echo. Martha Simmons, a 93-year-old resident who had not spoken since a stroke 3 years earlier, was the first to experience Elias's unique gift. He had settled beside her wheelchair during his initial tour of the facility, resting his head gently on her lap. After a few moments, her gnarled hand had reached down to stroke his fur, the first voluntary movement her caregivers had seen in months. Over the following weeks, Elias spent hours with Martha. He seemed to know exactly how long to stay, when to offer silent companionship, when to engage her with a gentle nudge. One afternoon, as he performed a trick Sarah had taught him, retrieving a specific book from a low shelf, Martha made a sound. It wasn't quite a word, but it was intentional, communicative. The staff was astonished. "He gives them something to respond to," Dr. Reynolds, the head physician, told Sarah during one of her regular visits. "Not demanding speech or recognition like humans do, but simply being present. It creates a safe space for them to reconnect." Similar stories emerged throughout Golden Haven. Leonard, a Vietnam veteran who had isolated himself from group activities, began joining others in the garden when Elias was present. Sophia, in the late stages of Alzheimer's, could recall her childhood dog's name after spending mornings with Elias at her feet. Small miracles bloomed in his wake. Sarah continued her research, documenting Elias's work at Golden Haven. What had begun as a study of interspecies bonding had evolved into something more profound, an exploration of how trauma and healing could be transmitted across different forms of life, how the lessons of one relationship could inform another. "Bruno saved him twice," she wrote in her journal, first from the cliff, and then by teaching him how to simply be present with suffering. To witness pain without turning away, without needing to fix it. To offer companionship on the hardest journeys. Every Sunday, Elias returned to Terra Serena, lying beside the old rock. Though Bruno was gone, his pawprints still marked the earth, and in the breeze that swept through the Golden Valley, Elias could still hear that gentle roar, the sound that had once saved both their lives. One of a lost puppy. The other of a bear long thawed dead inside. These Sunday pilgrimages became a ritual observed with clockwork precision regardless of weather or season. The sanctuary staff would watch from a respectful distance as Elias made his way up to the viewing rock, his red scarf bright against his now mature coat, the bear-shaped pin catching the light. There, with the valley spread below and the sky open above, Elias would sit in silent communion with the memory of his unlikely friend. Sometimes he would bring a small object from Golden Haven, a flower from the garden, a feather found on a walk, once even a child's drawing of a bear, and place it carefully on Bruno's grave before settling into his usual spot. "I think he's telling Bruno about his week," Sarah confided to Art one Sunday as they observed this ritual from afar, "about all the people he's helping." Art, his face more deeply lined now but his eyes still bright with the passion that had built this sanctuary, nodded slowly. "That's the thing about love, isn't it? It never really ends. It just changes form." The story of Bruno and Elias continued to spread, touching hearts far beyond the boundaries of Terra Serena. Visitors would come specifically to see Elias during his Sunday visits, to witness the dog who had been raised by a bear, who carried that legacy into the world of humans who needed him most. But for those who knew them best, who had watched their improbable friendship unfold day by day, the most powerful part of their story wasn't its remarkability but its simplicity. Two wounded beings had found each other across impossible divides of species and experience. They had offered each other what each needed most. Bruno had given Elias protection and wisdom. Elias had given Bruno a reason to live fully again, if only for a short time. And now, in the quiet quarters of Golden Haven, in the gentle pressure of Elias's head against a trembling hand, in the peaceful gaze that could wait endlessly for a response that might never come, Bruno's final gift continued to echo, touching lives he would never know, but somehow, perhaps, could feel.